Lisa paused at the hallway window. Rain hammered the parking lot in sheets, drowning the world in grey. Perfect. 20 hours on her feet, and tonight already carried the kind of mistake that never stayed contained. She exhaled, exhausted, and pushed into the locker room. Stopped. Her locker was open. Not forced. Not searched. Just open. On the bench beneath it sat a single object. A black umbrella. Folded neatly. Perfectly placed. Still warm when she touched it. Her breath hitched. No note. No message. But she didn't need one. Only one person moved like this, silent, precise, leaving presence instead of footprints. Only one person could walk into her hospital without permission. Only one person would anticipate her need before she ever voiced it. Kongmin. He shouldn't be here. Not in her world. Not in daylight. Lisa closed her eyes, the umbrella trembling slightly in her hand as rain pounded the roof. He was close. Too close. And whatever had drawn him out of the shadows meant something had already gone wrong. 6 hours earlier. The scalpel slipped. Not from Lisa Day's hand, her grip was perfect, steady as stone, but from the trembling fingers of Dr. Thomas Chen, the chief of surgery's son, who'd frozen mid-incision while she guided him through what should have been a routine appendectomy. Blood pooled in the cavity, dark and accusing, and Lisa's heart hammered as she calmly called for suction, her voice cutting through the OR's sudden tension like her blade through tissue. Clamp, she said, not to Thomas, but to the scrub nurse who knew better than to hesitate. Lisa's small hands moved with precision that bordered on artistry, her fingers a blur of controlled urgency as she contained the bleed Thomas had caused. Sweat beaded on her upper lip beneath her surgical mask, but her movements never wavered. She could feel the anesthesiologist's eyes on her, the attending surgeon's silent assessment from the observation deck above. This was her third save this month. Her third time pulling Thomas Chen's incompetent ass out of the fire. Nice catch, Dr. Day, the attending's voice crackled through the intercom, deliberately neutral. Everyone in this or knew what had happened. Everyone knew Thomas had panicked. And everyone knew that by tomorrow, Thomas would somehow take credit for the save while whispers followed Lisa through the hospital corridors. Scholarship girl, too ambitious, doesn't know her place. The surgery ended without further incident. Lisa stripped off her gloves with controlled movements, her petite frame vibrating with exhaustion she couldn't show. At 5'3" and soft in all the places Thomas and his circle found worthy of cruel commentary, she'd learned to make herself seem taller through sheer competence. Her dark skin gleamed under the harsh surgical lights as she scrubbed out, watching pink-tinged water spiral down the drain. Dr. Day. She didn't turn. She knew Thomas's voice, that particular blend of privilege and mediocrity that made her teeth ache. Thanks for the assist in there, he said, loading the word assist with just enough condescension to make it clear what story he'd be telling. I had it under control, but it's good to see the residents working as a team. Lisa's hands stilled under the running water. Her reflection in the chrome faucet showed her exhaustion, dark circles under darker eyes, her natural hair pulled back in a surgical cap that had left indents across her forehead. She was beautiful in a way that made people underestimate her. Soft features, warm brown eyes, a mouth that smiled too easily at patients and colleagues who deserved neither her warmth nor her time. Of course, she said quietly, because what else could she say? Thomas's father controlled her career with the stroke of a pen. One complaint, one whispered concern about her attitude, and her residency, everything she'd sacrificed for, every sleepless night and borrowed dollar, would evaporate. She finished scrubbing and left the OR, exhaustion pulling at her like hands trying to drag her under. The hospital corridor stretched before her, fluorescent lights humming their familiar migraine-inducing song. It was nearly midnight. She'd been on her feet for 16 hours. Her phone buzzed in her locker. One message, from a number that never appeared in her call history, that would vanish from her phone within minutes of reading. How is your night? 3 words. That was all. But Lisa's chest tightened anyway, her pulse quickening in a way that had nothing to do with exhaustion and everything to do with the memory of a boy who used to wait for her after tutoring sessions, a delinquent with bruised knuckles and eyes that saw too much, who'd once told her she had the kindest hands he'd ever known. Yeo Kongmin. She shouldn't text back. They'd agreed, years ago when he'd begun his ascent into the darkness he'd been born for and she'd started medical school, that distance was safest. His world and hers couldn't coexist. His name alone could destroy her career if anyone connected them. But her fingers moved anyway, long. You? The reply was immediate, thinking of you. Lisa closed her locker, pressing her forehead against the cool metal. Somewhere in this city, Kongmin was doing things she couldn't let herself imagine, things that required the strength in those scarred, tattooed hands, things that lived in the shadows where her careful, clean world couldn't reach. He'd built an empire while she'd built a career, and the only thing they shared now was this: messages sent in darkness, a protection she'd never asked for but had always felt hovering at the edges of her life. She deleted the conversation and headed for the residents' lounge. Thomas was already there, holding court with two other residents who laughed at his retelling of the surgery. In his version, Lisa had nearly caused the complication through overeager technique, and his quick thinking had saved the patient. Scholarship case like Day doesn't understand the pressure of real surgical decision-making, Thomas was saying, his voice carrying the particular frequency of casual cruelty that made Lisa's soft heart harden just slightly. When you come from nothing, when you have no real family backing you, no legacy in medicine. The patient lived, Lisa said quietly, dropping into a chair with her protein bar dinner. That's what matters. Thomas's smile was sharp. Of course. Though I've been meaning to talk to you about your technique. Some of the attendings have concerns. Which attendings? That's not really your business, is it? But don't worry. His smile widened. I'm sure we can work something out. Maybe if you're more of a team player, more cooperative, those concerns might disappear. The other residents had gone silent, watching this play out with a careful neutrality of people who knew which side of power they needed to stay on. Lisa felt the familiar burn of helpless rage in her throat, the knowledge that she was alone here, that she had no father to make phone calls, no family money to shield her, no network of powerful allies who'd gone to the right schools and joined the right clubs. She had her hands. Her brilliant, steady, healing hands. And somewhere in the darkness of Chicago, she had a man who'd once been a boy with bruised knuckles and a crushing vulnerability he'd shown only to her. I should get some sleep, Lisa said, standing. Early rounds tomorrow. Day, Thomas called after her. Board meeting next week. My father wants to discuss some concerns about your performance. I'd prepare yourself. The threat was clear. Lisa's hands trembled as she walked away, and she hated herself for the weakness, hated that her eyes burned with tears she wouldn't shed, hated that some part of her wanted to text that vanishing number and ask for help she had no right to request. She'd chosen this path. This clean, bright, difficult path where she saved lives with precision and science and swore an oath to do no harm. She couldn't ask a man who lived by violence to solve her problems. Even if she really wanted to. 3,000 miles away, in a penthouse office overlooking Chicago's glittering skyline, Yeo Kong-min stood at floor-to-ceiling windows with his phone in one scarred hand, reading a message that made his jaw tighten. Board meeting next week. Chen's son is moving against her. The text was from one of his people. He had them everywhere, including 3 orderlies and a night nurse at County Memorial who reported on Dr. Lisa Day's safety without her knowledge. Kong-min paid them well for their silence and their vigilance. He'd been protecting her from the shadows for 6 years. Ensuring her student loans were mysteriously reduced. Making sure the attending physicians who recognized her brilliance got quiet bonuses that improved her evaluations. Guaranteeing that the drunk driver who'd nearly hit her 2 years ago ended up in a prison cell before he could hurt anyone else. Lisa didn't know. She couldn't know. She'd chosen light, and he'd chosen darkness, and the only way to keep her safe was to never let the two worlds touch. But this. Kongmin's reflection in the window showed a man who made people cross streets to avoid him, 6'3" of controlled violence, broad shoulders under a perfectly tailored black suit, tattoos that crawled up his neck and disappeared into his collar, ink that told stories of blood and loyalty and power earned through ruthlessness. His face was beautiful in a way that unsettled people, all sharp angles and cold eyes, a mouth that rarely smiled and full lips that promised cruelty as easily as pleasure. He'd built the Park Syndicate into an empire. Politicians feared him. Rival families respected him. He controlled half of Chicago's underground economy, and his word was law in circles where law held no meaning. None of it mattered if Lisa Day's career burned because some mediocre surgeon's son felt threatened by her brilliance. Kong-min made a call. "Prepare the hospital acquisition file," he said when his lieutenant answered. "And get me a full dossier on Thomas Chun. Everything. Financial records, medical records, personal habits. I want to know every debt, every mistake, every secret." "Sir, the hospital board meets." "I know when they meet." Kongmin's voice was soft, controlled, deadly. "I'll be there." He ended the call and looked at his reflection again. Lisa had once told him, during those late-night tutoring sessions when he'd been a delinquent with more scars than prospects, that he had good hands. Strong hands that could do good things if he chose. He'd chosen differently. His hands had done terrible things in the years since. They'd broken bones and ended people and signed orders that silenced men. But they'd also protected the only good thing in his dark world. And now, finally, it was time to stop hiding in shadows. The county memorial boardroom was designed to intimidate. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs that cost more than most residents' monthly salaries, and windows that overlooked Chicago's medical district like a throne room surveying a kingdom. Lisa sat in a chair too large for her petite frame, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling, and listened to Thomas Chin lie with the practiced ease of a man who'd never faced consequences. Dr. Day's technique is simply too aggressive for a second-year resident, Thomas was saying, standing at the head of the table in a designer suit his father had undoubtedly purchased. The near miss in or for last week, the complications in her post-op cases, there's a pattern of recklessness that endangers patients. Lisa's nails bit into her palms. Every word was a calculated fabrication. The near miss had been his frozen panic. The complications were cases she'd salvaged from his incompetence. But around the table sat 12 board members who'd known Thomas since he was a child, who'd played golf with his father, who donated to campaigns and foundations that ensured their continued power. And then there was her, a scholarship resident with no connections, no legacy, no protection. Dr. Day, the chief of surgery, said, his voice heavy with performative regret, "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Lisa opened her mouth. Her prepared speech died on her tongue as the boardroom door opened. The temperature in the room dropped. Lisa felt it before she saw him, that particular charged silence that preceded Yeo Kongmin like a herald announcing a king. Her head turned, pulse stuttering, and there he was, filling the doorway with a presence that made the spacious boardroom feel suddenly, claustrophobically small. He'd changed. Of course he had. 6 years was a lifetime. The boy she'd tutored had been handsome in a rough, unfinished way. The man who entered the boardroom was devastating. Impossibly tall, shoulders that stretched his black suit jacket in a way that whispered of violence barely contained, and a face that belonged on magazine covers if magazine covers featured men who looked like they could end you with their bare hands and feel nothing. His hair was pushed back from a face of sharp angles and cold beauty, his dark eyes scanning the room with the lazy assessment of a predator identifying prey. Tattoos crawled up his neck. She could see the edges of ink disappearing into his collar, knew without seeing that they covered his chest, his arms, his back, a map of the darkness he'd embraced. He didn't look at her. Not yet. 4 men in identical black suits entered behind him, taking positions along the walls with military precision. Their silence was more frightening than any threat. "Who?" the chief began, half rising from his chair. "Sit down." Kongmin's voice was soft, almost gentle. It made every person in that room freeze. "I'm here for the board meeting. This is a closed session. I'm the donor." Kongmin moved to the table, pulling out a chair across from Lisa with deliberate slowness. "The anonymous benefactor who funded your new trauma center. $200 million, if memory serves. I believe that grants me a seat at this table." The silence was absolute. Lisa couldn't breathe. Her mind was spinning, trying to reconcile the messages in darkness with this public declaration, this impossible intervention. Kongmin had sworn he'd stay in the shadows. They'd agreed. This was her world, her career, His eyes found hers. The impact was physical. Lisa felt it in her chest, her stomach, lower. Heat and ice simultaneously. His gaze was cold, controlled, revealing nothing, but she knew him. She knew the slight tightness around his eyes, the way his jaw clenched for just a moment, the muscle that jumped in his throat. He was furious. Not at her. For her. "Mr. Yeo," the chief said carefully, recovering his composure with visible effort, "while we appreciate your generosity, this is an internal matter. You're trying to fire Dr. Day for surgical complications she didn't cause." Kongmin's voice never rose. He didn't need volume to fill the room with dread. "That interests me. You see, I have certain standards for institutions I fund. Excellence, integrity, fairness. And I've been reviewing Dr. Day's record extensively." He withdrew a folder from his jacket, black leather, expensive, ominous, and placed it on the table. "Her surgical outcomes are exemplary. Her patient satisfaction scores are the highest in her residency class. Her techniques, while unconventional, show the kind of innovative thinking that builds great surgeons." Kongmin opened the folder, his scarred hands moving with deliberate care. "So I have to wonder why a resident with such a remarkable record would be facing termination." "There have been concerns," Thomas started. "From you." Kongmin's eyes shifted to Thomas, and Lisa watched the younger surgeon pale. Dr. Thomas Chun. Let's discuss your record, shall we? Another folder. This one thicker. 14 surgical complications in 18 months. 7 cases where attending physicians had to intervene to prevent catastrophic patient harm. 3 formal complaints from nursing staff regarding inappropriate behavior in the OR. Kongmin's voice remained soft, conversational, as he recited facts that drained color from Thomas's face. And then there's the interesting matter of your gambling habits. The chief of surgery stood. That's enough. Sit down. This time, Kongmin's voice carried an edge that made Lisa's breath catch. The chief sat. Your son owes $300,000 to various establishments across this city. Most of it to the Park Syndicate. My syndicate. Horror dawned on Thomas's face. Lisa watched transfixed, as the man who tormented her for months realized exactly what kind of danger he was in. The debts are overdue, Kongmin continued, his tone never changing. We've been patient, but patience has limits. And when I learned that one of my debtors was attempting to destroy the career of a brilliant surgeon to cover his own incompetence. He leaned back in his chair, the movement casual, terrifying. That felt personal. Thomas's voice cracked. I can explain. You falsified surgical reports. You endangered patients. You bullied residents and staff. You tried to ruin Dr. Day's career because her skill made you look inadequate. Kongmin's eyes were empty of mercy. You tried to destroy a surgeon whose hands save lives. That is unforgivable. The room was frozen. Board members stared at folders, at the table, at anything but the confrontation unfolding before them. Lisa's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. This was too much, too public, too dangerous. Get out, Kongmin said softly to Thomas. You're done here. Your medical career is over. Your debts will be forgiven if you leave Chicago by tomorrow and never practice medicine again. If you refuse. He smiled, and Lisa felt ice slide down her spine. Well, the Park Syndicate has other methods of debt collection. Thomas ran, actually stumbled from his chair and fled the boardroom, leaving a wake of shocked silence. Kongmin stood, straightening his suit jacket with meticulous care. Dr. Day's record speaks for itself. I trust this matter is closed. He looked at the chief of surgery, who seemed to have aged a decade. I'll be in touch regarding the trauma center's completion. We have many more details to discuss about its operation and staffing. The threat was clear, try this again, and I'll take apart this entire institution. He walked toward the door, his men falling into formation around him. He didn't look at Lisa again, didn't acknowledge her. As far as the board knew, she was just another resident he'd coincidentally defended. But as he passed her chair, so close she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that made her dizzy, he murmured, too soft for anyone else to hear. Don't follow me yet. Then he was gone, taking his cold presence and silent menace with him, leaving Lisa sitting in a boardroom full of people who would never look at her the same way again. The chief cleared his throat. This meeting is adjourned. Lisa barely heard him. Her pulse roared in her ears, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was crashing through her system. She stood on unsteady legs, gathered her things with mechanical precision, and walked from the boardroom on autopilot. The hallway stretched before her, empty except for the fluorescent lights and the sound of her own ragged breathing. She made it 20 feet before her knees buckled. An arm caught her, strong, sure, familiar. Kongmin pulled her into an empty corridor, his body blocking her from view, his hand on her waist the only thing keeping her upright. Up close, he was overwhelming, too tall, too broad, too intense. Heat radiated from him, and she could feel his heart beating steady and strong where their bodies pressed together. You, Lisa's voice shook. What did you just do? Saved your career. His face was impassive, but his hand tightened on her waist, possessive, protective. You're welcome. I didn't ask. You shouldn't have to ask. His eyes searched her face, and for just a moment, she saw past the cold control to the rage beneath. Did you think I'd let them destroy you? You swore you'd stay away. Lisa's hands pressed against his chest, felt the solid wall of muscle beneath expensive fabric, the thunder of his heart that belied his calm exterior. We agreed. Your world and mine, they can't touch. They already have. His voice dropped lower, intimate, dangerous. They've been touching since the moment I saw what that bastard was doing to you. Did you think I could watch you suffer and do nothing? I don't need. You don't need saving. I know. His free hand came up to cup her face, his scarred palm rough against her soft skin, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. But I can't watch them hurt you, Lisa. I won't. She should push him away. Should tell him this was insane, that he just exposed himself, exposed them, that the consequences would be catastrophic. But God, she'd missed him. Missed this. The only person who'd ever made her feel protected instead of helpless, safe instead of small. You're shaking, he murmured, and pulled her closer, wrapping her in arms that felt like safety and danger braided together. I've got you. Lisa buried her face in his chest and let herself shake apart. Lisa's apartment was small, a converted studio in a building that had seen better decades, with water stains on the ceiling and a heater that rattled like bones in winter. She'd refused Kongmin's repeated offers to find her something better, to pay off her loans, to make her life easier in 1,000 ways his money and power could accomplish. She'd needed to do this herself. Needed to prove that she could build something clean and good without his darkness touching it. Now he stood in her cramped living room, looking impossibly large and dangerous among her furniture and medical textbooks, and she didn't know whether to kiss him or throttle him. You had no right, she said, pacing in her scrubs because she hadn't had time to change, hadn't had time to process, hadn't had time to do anything except drag him here before someone saw them together. You had no right to do that. I had every right. Kongmin's voice was calm, controlled, but his eyes tracked her movement like a predator watching prey. He was trying to destroy you. So what? Lisa spun to face him, exhaustion and adrenaline making her reckless. So what, Kongmin? That's my life. My career. My battle to fight. Not alone. Yes, alone. Her voice cracked. That was the deal. You stay in your world, I stay in mine, and we pretend, she choked on the words. We pretend it's enough to have these little moments in the dark. These messages that disappear. This protection I never asked for. You think I could stop? Kongmin moved closer, not touching her but surrounding her with his presence. You think I could just walk away and leave you unprotected? I don't need. Don't. His voice turned sharp. Don't tell me you don't need protection. I've watched you for 6 years, Lisa. I've seen them dismiss you, underestimate you, try to break you because you're too brilliant and too different and they can't stand that you're better than them. His jaw clenched. I've watched you come home crying and pretend you're fine. I've seen the fear in your eyes when you think no one's looking. Don't tell me you don't need. How? Lisa's whisper cut through his words. How have you been watching me? The silence stretched between them, taut and terrible. I have people, Kongmin said finally. At the hospital. In your building. Watching, always watching, to keep you safe. Horror and something else, something warm and treacherous, coiled in Lisa's stomach. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting you. He stepped closer, and she could see the tension in his shoulders, the barely leashed intensity in his dark eyes. From the moment you started your residency, I've made sure you're safe. The drunk driver who nearly hit you? He's in prison. The loan officer who tried to charge you illegal interest rates? He doesn't work in banking anymore. Every person who's tried to hurt you has discovered there are consequences. You can't do that. Lisa's voice rose. You can't just manipulate my entire life because you think I need protecting. Then tell me how to stop. Kongmin's control finally cracked, his voice turning raw. Tell me how to stop loving you. Tell me how to stop caring whether you're safe, whether you're happy, whether some privileged idiot is trying to steal your future. Tell me how to turn it off, Lisa, because I've tried. God knows I've tried. The apartment went silent except for their harsh breathing. Lisa stared at him, this beautiful, terrifying man who'd once been a boy with bruised knuckles and a crush he tried to hide during tutoring sessions, who'd walked away from her when he joined his family's business because he'd known what he was becoming, who'd let her go because he'd loved her enough to want her free of his darkness. I stayed away, Kongmin said quietly, because I didn't want my world to stain yours. Because you deserved clean hands and a clean conscience and a life that had nothing to do with what I am. But watching them hurt you, seeing you suffer alone, his hands curled into fists. I can't do it anymore. I won't. Even if it costs me everything? Lisa's voice broke. Even if every doctor in that hospital now thinks I'm connected to the Korean mob? Even if my career is destroyed because of what you did today? Your career won't be destroyed. Kongmin's certainty was absolute. I made sure of that. How? By threatening them? By making them afraid? Lisa pressed her hands to her face, exhaustion crushing her. Don't you see? That's not winning. That's just exchanging one kind of powerlessness for another. You're not powerless. He closed the distance between them, his hands on her shoulders gentle despite the strength in them. You've never been powerless. You're the most brilliant surgeon in that hospital. You save lives with these hands. He captured one of her hands, brought it to his lips, kissed her palm with devastating reverence. These beautiful, talented, healing hands that I would burn the world to protect. Lisa felt tears slip down her cheeks. I don't want you to burn the world for me. Too late. His smile was bitter. It's already burning. Has been since the moment I realized I'd never stop loving you. She should push him away. Should tell him they couldn't do this, that the costs were too high, that his protection would destroy the very thing he was trying to preserve. But she was tired. So tired of fighting alone, of being strong, of pretending she didn't want this, want him, with a ferocity that scared her. I hate you, she whispered. I know. Kongmin pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her petite frame, making her feel small and safe and cherished. Hate me all you want. I'm not going anywhere. Lisa's phone buzzed. She pulled it from her pocket with shaking hands, read the message, and felt her world tilt again. I'm suspended, she said numbly. Pending investigation into my relationship with questionable individuals. Kongmin's arms tightened around her. His voice, when he spoke, was soft and absolutely lethal. Then I'll fix the world around you until you can walk back into it. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in controlled demolition. Lisa wasn't allowed to watch. Kongmin had insisted she stay away, stay clean, let him work in the shadows where he belonged. But she heard the results through the hospital grapevine, through whispered conversations that reached her even in suspension. Anonymous tips to medical licensing boards. Financial audits that revealed decades of kickbacks and embezzlement. Leaked emails showing a pattern of discrimination in residency admissions. A surgical resident who'd been sexually harassed by an attending and paid to stay quiet suddenly finding the courage to speak up when lawyers mysteriously appeared offering pro bono representation. The hospital's leadership was hemorrhaging. Board members resigned in disgrace. The chief of surgery announced his retirement to spend more time with family. And through it all, Thomas Chen's name kept appearing, but not as a villain, as a symptom. Evidence of a systemic rot that had allowed mediocrity and cruelty to flourish while brilliance was suppressed. Lisa watched it unfold from her apartment, studying for her reinstatement hearing, and tried not to think about what it meant that Kongmin could dismantle an entire institution's power structure without raising his voice. Her hearing was scheduled for a cold Tuesday morning in February. Lisa dressed carefully, a navy suit that made her look professional, hair pulled back, minimal makeup. She'd prepared her defense meticulously, surgery records, patient outcomes, attending physician evaluations that praised her skill even when they'd been too afraid to speak up during the board meeting. She would win on her own merit. She had to. The hearing room was different from the boardroom, smaller, less intimidating, with a panel of 3 external reviewers who'd been brought in specifically because the hospital's internal structure was under investigation. Lisa sat across from them, hands folded, heart racing, and presented her case with the same precision she brought to surgery. They listened. They asked questions. They reviewed her records with careful attention. And then they made her wait in the hallway while they deliberated. Lisa paced, her heels clicking on tile, her mind spinning through everything she'd said, everything she might have said better, all the ways this could still go wrong. Dr. Day. She turned. One of the reviewers stood in the doorway, her expression neutral. The panel has reached a decision. Lisa's heart stopped. Your suspension is lifted effective immediately. Furthermore, we're recommending you for early advancement to chief resident based on your exceptional surgical record and patient outcomes. The reviewer's expression softened slightly. We apologize that it took this long to recognize your contributions. You should never have been placed in this position. Lisa's knees buckled. She caught herself on the wall, blinking back tears, trying to process words that felt too good to be true. Dr. Chun has been removed from the program permanently, the reviewer continued. Along with 2 attending physicians and several administrative staff who enabled the hostile environment. We're committed to ensuring this never happens again. Lisa couldn't speak. Could only nod, her throat too tight for words. She left the hospital in a daze, barely aware of the cold February air, the gray Chicago sky, the way people on the sidewalk moved around her like water around a stone. She'd won. On her merit, her record, her skill. But she knew, that none of it would have happened without the shadows moving behind the scenes. He was waiting outside. Kongmin leaned against a black car that screamed luxury, wearing a dark coat that made him look like every fantasy and nightmare rolled into one. His hands were in his pockets, his expression unreadable, but his eyes tracked her the moment she exited the building. Lisa walked toward him on autopilot, her body pulled by a gravity she'd stopped fighting. "I heard," he said quietly. "Did you?" Lisa stopped in front of him, tipping her head back to meet his eyes. "Or did you make it happen?" "You made it happen." His voice was firm. "Your record, your skill, your dedication. I just removed the obstacles in your way. By destroying people's careers. By threatening institutions. By using your power. Yes. No apology. No justification. Just acknowledgement. I used everything I have to make sure they saw what I've always known, that you're extraordinary." Lisa stared at him, this beautiful, terrifying man who turned her world upside down to set it right, and felt something fundamental shift inside her. "I don't need protection," she said. "I know. I don't need saving. I know that too. But her voice caught. I want you." The transformation was subtle but devastating. Kongmin's cold composure cracked, just slightly, just enough. His eyes heated. His jaw clenched. His hands came out of his pockets slowly, as if he was fighting for control. "Lisa." Her name in his voice was a prayer and a warning. "If you say that, if you mean that." "I mean it." Lisa stepped closer, close enough to feel his heat, to smell his cologne, to see the pulse jumping in his throat. "I've missed you. For 6 years, I've missed you. And I'm tired of pretending I don't want this, don't want you, don't want." He kissed her. The world went white, then red, then supernova. Kongmin's hands cupped her face with a gentleness that belied the hunger in his kiss, his mouth claiming hers with 6 years of restrained desire finally breaking free. Lisa gasped against his lips, her hands fisting in his coat, pulling him closer as his tongue swept into her mouth, tasting her, learning her, making her dizzy with want. He kissed like he did everything else, with complete control that barely masked devastating intensity. One hand tangled in her hair, tilting her head to deepen the kiss, while the other wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against his body. Lisa felt small and safe and consumed, felt heat pooling low in her belly, felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling to dust. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against hers, his thumb tracing her kiss-swollen lower lip with reverence. "Come home with me," he murmured. "Let me show you what you've been missing." Lisa's laugh was shaky. "Is that your version of romance?" "No." His smile was slow, wicked, devastating. "Romance comes later. First, I need to make up for 6 years of wanting you." Heat flooded her cheeks, her core, everywhere his eyes touched. "I have rounds in the morning. You're chief resident now. You can be late." He kissed her again, softer, sweeter, a promise. "Let me take care of you, Lisa. Let me show you that my hands can do more than hurt." She should say no. Should be smart, be careful, be. "Yes," Lisa whispered, and let him pull her into the car. 6 months later. The trauma center's opening night was a study in controlled chaos. Politicians glad-handing, donors congratulating each other, journalists photographing the gleaming new facility that would serve Chicago's neediest communities. Lisa moved through the crowd in a midnight blue dress that hugged her curves, accepting congratulations from attending physicians who'd once dismissed her, smiling at board members who tried to fire her. She was chief resident now, the youngest in the hospital's history. Her trauma protocols were being adopted across the country. Her research was getting published in prestigious journals. She'd won. On her merit, her skill, her dedication. But when she looked across the crowded atrium, past the champagne and canapes and self-congratulation, she saw him. Kongmin stood against the far wall, wearing a black suit that made him look like sin incarnated, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin heat despite the crowd between them. He'd avoided the spotlight tonight, had let the hospital administration take credit for the building he'd funded, had stayed in the shadows where he was most comfortable. But he'd come. For her. Lisa excused herself from a conversation with the new chief of surgery and crossed the atrium, weaving through bodies until she reached him. "You're lurking," she said. "I'm watching you shine." His smile was small, private, meant only for her. It's my favorite view. 6 months. 6 months of learning each other again, of building something between his darkness and her light, of proving that two worlds could coexist if both people were willing to bend. He taught her that protection didn't mean control, that his ruthlessness could be channeled into keeping her safe without diminishing her strength. She taught him that love didn't require sacrifice, that she could stand beside him without losing herself. They were still learning. Still figuring out how a mafia boss and a surgeon built a life together. But God, they were trying. Come with me, Lisa murmured, taking his hand. I want to show you something. She led him through corridors still smelling of fresh paint, past operating rooms equipped with cutting-edge technology, to a small office on the 3rd floor. Her name was already on the door, Dr. Lisa Day, Chief Resident, Trauma Surgery. Kongmin's hand tightened on hers. Lisa. You did this. She turned to face him, reaching up to cup his beautiful, dangerous face. You built this for me. For Chicago. For all the people who'll be saved here. I built it because your hands save lives. His voice was rough with emotion, and I wanted to give them the best possible place to work. Lisa pulled him down into a kiss, pouring 6 months of gratitude and love and desire into it. He responded immediately, his hands spanning her waist, lifting her easily onto the desk, stepping between her thighs with a hunger that made her pulse race. We can't, she gasped against his mouth even as her legs wrapped around his hips. The party can wait. He kissed down her throat, his teeth grazing her pulse point. I've been watching you all night in this dress. Do you know what you do to me? Tell me. Lisa's hands found his shoulders, his neck, tangling in his hair. Show me. He did. With hands that had hurt and destroyed and built an empire, he touched her with reverence, with passion, with a gentleness that made tears sting her eyes. This was their balance, his darkness and her light, his protection and her independence, his ruthlessness and her compassion. They fit. Imperfectly, impossibly, perfectly. Later, much later, they rejoined the party. Lisa's dress was slightly rumpled, her lips kiss-swollen, her hand firmly clasped in Kongmin's as they moved through the crowd together. No more shadows. No more hiding. When the ribbon-cutting ceremony began, when speeches were made and cameras flashed, Kongmin stood beside her. Not behind, not in darkness, but at her side where he belonged. As the ribbon fell and applause filled the atrium, he leaned close enough that only she could hear. Your hands save lives, he murmured against her ear. Mine protect yours. That's all I've ever wanted. Lisa laced her fingers with his, surgeon's hands and killer's hands, healing and protection, light and shadow braided together, and squeezed. I love you, she whispered back. His smile transformed his face, made him look young and unguarded and beautiful. I know. I've always known. They stood together as the crowd surged around them, as the future they'd built together, messy and complicated and real, stretched ahead. For the first time, she wasn't walking alone. And for the first time, he wasn't living in the dark. The trauma center's lights blazed behind them, a beacon in the Chicago night, proof that even the darkest hands could build something bright, that love could exist in the space between shadow and light, that two people from impossible worlds could create their own. Together.